Imagine feeding the same kids lunch every single day for 3 years. You know their favorite foods. You know which one hates vegetables. You know which one always asks for extra bread. You feel like family. Now imagine finding out, on an ordinary Tuesday, that their mother rules an entire galaxy. Not a city. Not a country. Not a planet. A galaxy. And she knew about you the whole time. Today's story is about an ordinary man named Daniel Cole. A simple cook. A good heart. A quiet life. He never asked for anything special. He just showed up every day and made sure those kids were fed. But what was really happening behind the scenes will blow your mind. 3 things are going to shock you in this story. First, who those children really were. Second, why their mother never revealed herself. And third, what she had been watching Daniel do the entire time. This is not just a sci-fi story. This is a story about kindness so powerful, it changed the fate of an entire galaxy. Let me show you exactly how this happened. Daniel Cole woke up the same way he always did. 6 in the morning. Eyes barely open. Coffee brewing in the small corner of his even smaller apartment. The kind of apartment where you could hear your neighbor sneeze through the wall. The kind of life where nothing special ever seemed to happen. He was 34 years old. Not rich. Not famous. Not remarkable, at least not in any way the world would notice. He worked at a place called Crossroads Canteen. It was a mid-level food station sitting right on the edge of Sector 7, a mixed-use district in New Bristol, England. New Bristol was one of the first human cities rebuilt after the Great Integration. That was what people called it. The Great Integration. The moment in history when humanity officially made contact with dozens of alien species, and the whole world changed overnight. Most humans were still getting used to it. Some people welcomed the aliens. Some people feared them. Most people just tried to stay out of the way and live their normal lives. Daniel was one of those people. He didn't have strong opinions about alien politics. He didn't watch the news broadcasts arguing about interspecies treaties. He didn't care much about who was in power on what distant planet. He cared about his kitchen. He cared about the food coming out hot and tasting right. That was his world. Every morning he walked 12 minutes to Crossroads Canteen. He unlocked the back door. He turned on the stoves. He prepped the ingredients. He was always the first one there, and usually the last one to leave. The canteen served a mix of humans and alien visitors passing through Sector 7. Most of the alien species had adjusted their diets to match human food, at least partially. Some of them genuinely loved Earth food. Daniel took quiet pride in that. He believed food was the one language every living creature understood. Then one day, about 3 years before this story really begins, 3 children walked in. They were small, maybe 8 or 9 years old by human standards. Their skin was a deep, vivid blue, not the pale blue of a cold winter sky. A rich, deep, luminous blue, like the ocean on a perfect summer day. Their eyes were wide and golden, and they caught the light in a way that made you stop for a second. They had pointed ears, long black hair, and they were clearly very, very hungry. Daniel was wiping down the counter when they pushed open the front door and stood there looking around nervously. No adults with them. No guardian he could see. Just 3 small blue kids with big golden eyes, scanning the room like they weren't sure if they were allowed to be there. He didn't hesitate. "Hey," he said, keeping his voice calm and easy. "You guys hungry?" The tallest one, clearly the oldest of the 3, looked at him with cautious eyes. She nodded slowly. "Sit down wherever you like," Daniel said. "I'll bring something out." He went back into his kitchen and made 3 plates. Rice, grilled vegetables, a light protein that most alien species could safely eat. He added a little extra bread on the side, because he always did that for kids. He brought the plates out and set them in front of the three children. The youngest one, a tiny girl with a small braid in her hair, looked at the food. Then she looked up at Daniel with the biggest eyes he had ever seen. "For us?" she asked. Her voice was small and a little uncertain, like she was genuinely surprised anyone would do something kind without being asked. "Yeah," Daniel said. "For you." She picked up her fork carefully, like she was handling something precious, and took the first bite. Her face changed completely. She smiled so wide it looked like it might break her face in half. Daniel laughed. He couldn't help it. That reaction right there, that was exactly why he loved his job. He went back to his kitchen. He had no idea he had just changed his entire life. They came back the next day. Daniel was not surprised. Good food has a way of bringing people back. That was something his grandmother always said, and he had never found a reason to disagree. This time they sat at the same table as before, the corner booths near the big window. They were quiet and polite, and they waited patiently while he finished serving another customer before walking over. "Same as yesterday?" he asked. The oldest one nodded. Then, after a small pause, she added, "Please." He smiled and went back to the kitchen. He made the same 3 plates. Rice, grilled vegetables, light protein, extra bread. He added something new this time, a small dish of sweet glazed root vegetables that he had made that morning as a special. He set it in the middle of the table between the 3 of them. The youngest one looked at the new dish with wide, curious eyes. She poked it gently with her fork. Then she took a small, careful bite. Her eyes went huge. She grabbed her older sister's arm and shook it. She said something fast in her own language that Daniel did not understand. But whatever she said made all 3 of them laugh. He watched from behind the counter and smiled to himself. He didn't know their names yet. He didn't know anything about where they came from or why they were in Sector 7, without any adult looking after them. He had a dozen questions forming in the back of his mind. But he didn't push. That was not who Daniel was. He figured they would tell him things when they were ready. It turned out they came back every single day that week. And the week after that. By the end of the first month, Daniel knew all 3 of their names. The oldest was called Sira. She was serious and protective, and always sat facing the door like she was keeping watch. The middle one was Lyra. She was quieter than the others, and spent most of the meal watching Daniel work with calm, observant eyes. And the youngest, the one with the braid and the giant smile, was Mira. Myra became Daniel's shadow. She followed him to the counter after meals. She watched him cook through the kitchen window. She asked him questions about every single ingredient he used. She wanted to know where each thing came from. She wanted to know how he learned to cook. She wanted to know if human food always tasted this good, or if Daniel was special. He laughed every time she asked that last one. "I'm not special," he always told her. "I just pay attention." Myra would scrunch up her small blue face at that answer, like she didn't quite believe him. The months went by. Seasons changed. The canteen got busier. Daniel got a small raise. He moved to a slightly larger apartment, one where he could only sometimes hear his neighbor sneeze. The girls kept coming. Every day. Without fail. Sometimes they were there when he opened. Sometimes they arrived at midday. Occasionally they showed up in the late afternoon when the canteen was quieter. But they always came. And Daniel always made sure their table was ready and their plates were hot. Other staff members at the canteen noticed. Maria, the weekend server, once pulled Daniel aside and asked him who paid for the children's meals. Daniel looked at her like the question didn't fully compute. "Nobody pays," he said simply. "They're kids." Maria raised her eyebrows. "You feed them for free. Every day." Every day, he confirmed. Then he went back to the kitchen like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Because to Daniel it was obvious. He never once thought about what it cost him. He never once considered stopping. He just showed up, every single day, and made sure those 3 kids were fed. What he did not know, what nobody had told him, was that someone else was watching him do it. Someone very far away. Someone very powerful. And she had been watching from the very first day. Her name was Vailindra. If you had asked anyone in the known galaxy who held the most power, not military power, not economic power, but true deep cosmic authority, most informed beings would have spoken her name quietly and with great respect. She was the sovereign of the Elan people, a civilization so ancient that human history looked like a single page torn from a book that had no ending. The Elan had explored galaxies when humans were still learning to build fires. They had mapped stars that no telescope on Earth could even reach. They had developed technologies that human scientists would spend centuries trying to understand. And Vailindra led all of them. She was not a queen in the way humans used that word. She was something deeper than that. She was the living center of her people's identity. Every decision that shaped the Elan civilization passed through her. Every alliance forged with other species carried her name. Every war avoided, and there had been many over the centuries, was the result of her patience and her wisdom. She was brilliant. She was powerful. She was feared and loved in equal measure across 100 star systems. And she was also a mother. Sira, Lyra, and Myra were her daughters. The reason they were in Sector 7, in New Bristol, England, on a small blue planet called Earth, was not an accident. Vailindra had sent them deliberately. It was part of something the Elan called the grounding ritual. Every Elan royal child, no matter how powerful their bloodline, was required to spend a period of time living among ordinary people. Without titles, without protection details, without wealth on display. The purpose was to teach empathy, to teach the future leaders of a civilization how ordinary life actually felt, how it felt to be uncertain, how it felt to need something and not know if you would receive it. The girls had arrived in New Bristol with a small, secure residence, a trusted guardian who watched from a careful distance, and strict instructions not to reveal who they were to anyone. They were to observe, to experience, to learn. What Vailindra had not fully planned for was Daniel Cole. She had access to monitoring feeds, basic security channels her trusted guardian maintained in the area. She was not spying in any invasive sense. She simply needed to know her daughters were safe. On the 3rd day, while reviewing the morning feed from Sector 7, she watched a human man in a gray apron set 3 plates of hot food in front of her daughters without hesitation. Without being asked, without any knowledge of who they were, without expectation of anything in return. She watched Myra's face when she took that first bite. And Vailindra, the most powerful sovereign in the known galaxy, sat alone in her command chamber on a ship traveling at the edge of a distant star system. And she felt something shift inside her chest. She called her guardian that evening. "Tell me about the human at the food station," she said. Her guardian gave her a full report. Daniel Cole, 34 years old, born in Sheffield, England, no family nearby, no significant wealth, no political connections, a cook who had worked the same job for 7 years, a man who, by every measurable standard, the world had not done a great deal for. Vailindra listened carefully. Then she asked one more question. Has he ever asked the girls anything about where they come from? Her guardian paused, then answered, "No, Sovereign. He has never asked. He simply feeds them and makes sure they are comfortable." Vailindra was quiet for a long time after that. "Watch him," she finally said. Not to protect the girls from him. Watch him because I want to understand him. Her guardian acknowledged the order. And from that moment, without Daniel ever knowing, the most powerful being in the galaxy began paying very close attention to one quiet cook in a small canteen in New Bristol. Because something about this human did not fit any category she had ever encountered before. 2 more years passed. 2 full years of plates, of extra bread, of Myra asking 1,000 questions, of Sierra sitting guard at the corner table, of Lyra watching everything with those calm, observant eyes that missed absolutely nothing. 2 years of Daniel simply showing up. During that time, Vailindra built what she privately called a Daniel file. It was not an official document. It was not a government record. It was a personal collection of observations that she reviewed quietly in her private hours. She watched him give his last meal credit to a homeless man outside the canteen on a cold November night. She watched him stay 2 hours after closing to help young alien couple whose translator device had broken and who could not communicate with anyone in the district. She watched him notice when Lyra seemed sad one afternoon, something even Lyra's sisters had not picked up on, and quietly bring her a small extra dish of the glazed root vegetables she loved without saying a single word about it. He never made a show of any of it. That was the thing Vailindra kept returning to. In her centuries of experience dealing with powerful civilizations, diplomats, politicians, and leaders of every kind, she had learned that most beings who did good things wanted to be seen doing them. There was nothing wrong with that. Recognition was a natural desire. But Daniel never seemed to want it. He did good things the way he breathed. Quietly, automatically, without drama. She began including observations about him in her personal journals. Journals that the Alon archivists would eventually study for generations. And in those journals, between entries about galactic treaties and stellar navigation, were detailed reflections on a human cook in New Bristol who had no idea anyone was watching. Meanwhile, the girls were changing. Sierra had softened. She still sat facing the door. Old habits die hard, but she had started smiling more easily. She had started trusting more freely. She engaged with the other customers at the canteen with a warmth she had not shown when she first arrived. Lyra had started asking Daniel if she could help in the kitchen. Not cook, just help. Pass ingredients. Watch technique. He had been delighted by this and had started teaching her small things. How to tell when oil is ready. How to test if bread is done. She absorbed everything with that quiet, intense focus she brought to all things. And Myra had become something like Daniel's unofficial apprentice, best friend, and personal comedian, all rolled into one small, very enthusiastic blue person. She had started writing things down in a small book she carried everywhere. Daniel had asked her once what she was writing. She looked up at him with those giant golden eyes and said very seriously, "I am recording important things." "What kinds of important things?" he asked. "Things that should not be forgotten," she said. He laughed and ruffled her hair gently and went back to cooking. He had no idea she was building a record of every single thing he had ever taught her about food, about kindness, about patience, a record that would one day be presented to the Alon Grand Archive as the personal testimony of a royal princess about the most significant human she had ever encountered. But none of that had happened yet. What happened next was far more immediate. On a morning in early spring, a bright, clear morning that felt too calm for what was about to occur, Daniel arrived at Crossroads Canteen to find it closed. Official seals on the door. District authority notices. The building was being repurposed as part of a new infrastructure development in Sector 7. The canteen had 48 hours before it had to fully vacate. Daniel stood on the pavement outside and stared at the notice for a long time. He was not angry. That was not really his nature. He was just quiet. And then, slowly, he started thinking about 3 kids who came here every single day. And his first thought, his very first thought, was not about his job or his income or his future. It was, where will they eat? He spent the next 2 days trying to figure out a solution. He contacted every food station in Sector 7. He called in favors with other cooks he knew. He mapped out which places were safe for alien children to eat without being made to feel unwelcome. He put together a small list and wrote it out by hand on a piece of paper. He was going to give it to Sierra the next time he saw her. He never got the chance. On the morning of the second day, the last day before the canteen fully closed, Daniel arrived to pack up his kitchen equipment. He was alone in the building. Quiet. Just him and the hum of the empty refrigeration units and the sound of the city outside. He was wrapping the last set of cooking pans when he heard the front door open. He came out from the kitchen. All 3 girls were standing in the entrance. But they were not alone. Behind them stood a woman. She was tall, extraordinarily still in the way that very powerful people sometimes are, like they have no need to fill space with movement because the space already belongs to them. Her skin was the same vivid luminous blue as the girls. Her eyes were a deep silver that caught the light and held it. She wore no obvious crown, no dramatic royal robes, just simple clothes, clean and elegant in their simplicity. But Daniel felt something in the room change the moment she walked inches. He couldn't explain it. It was like the air itself understood she was there. Myra stepped forward immediately. "Daniel," she said, with unusual formality for a child who normally talked 100 words a minute. "This is our mother." Daniel looked at the woman. She looked back at him. "My name is Vailindra," she said. Her voice was calm and measured. "I have wanted to meet you for a very long time." Daniel blinked. "Me?" "You," she confirmed. There was a short silence. Then Daniel, being Daniel, did the only thing that made sense to him in that moment. He looked at the 3 girls and said, "Have you eaten yet?" Myra burst out laughing. Lyra smiled quietly. Even Sierra, serious, watchful Sierra, covered her mouth to hide a grin. Vailindra looked at this man for a moment. And then, for the first time in what felt like a very long time, she laughed too. It was a real laugh. Surprised and genuine and completely unguarded. Daniel packed up 2 portable burners and cooked one last meal in the empty canteen. Rice, grilled vegetables, light protein, extra bread, the glazed root vegetables for Lyra, double portion for Myra, and 1 extra plate that he set in front of Vailindra. She looked at the food. Then she looked at him. "You truly do not know who I am," she said. It was not quite a question. "You're their mom," Daniel said simply. "That's enough for me." Vailindra was quiet for a moment. "I have negotiated with emperors," she said softly. "I have ended wars. I have held civilizations together with decisions made in a single hour. In all of that time, in all of those years, very few beings have ever made me feel simply welcome." She looked down at the plate. "You made my daughters feel safe," she said, "without knowing who they were, without expecting anything. You just fed them." "They were hungry," Daniel said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. Because to him it was. Vailindra picked up her fork. She took a bite. She was quiet for a moment. "This is remarkable," she said. Daniel smiled. "Extra bread." "Please," she said. They sat together in the empty canteen, a sovereign of the galaxy, her 3 daughters, and 1 quiet cook from Sheffield, and ate the last meal Crossroads canteen would ever serve. And Daniel finally learned the truth about the children he had fed every day for years. And the most powerful woman in the galaxy finally sat across from the most quietly extraordinary human she had ever observed. And somehow, in that simple moment, it felt exactly right. Here is the part of this story that stays with you long after the screen goes dark. Vailindra later stated, in the official Alan Grand Archive, that her encounter with Daniel Cole fundamentally reshaped how the Alan civilization approached its relationship with humanity. Not because of politics, not because of technology or military strength. Because of a plate of food. Because of a man who saw 3 hungry kids and never once asked if they were worth the trouble. The grounding ritual had been designed to teach the royal children about ordinary life. Nobody expected ordinary life to teach the queen something too. Daniel never asked for recognition. He never sought power. He just showed up every day and gave what he had. And somehow that, of all the grand gestures in the galaxy, turned out to be the most powerful thing of all. If this opened your eyes, so let's bring it all together. Daniel Cole was nobody special. That is exactly what made him extraordinary. He fed 3 alien kids every day for years, not because he knew they were royalty, but because they were hungry and he could help. That was the whole reason. Vailindra, the most powerful being in the galaxy, watched that simple act of consistent kindness and was changed by it. Not by speeches, not by grand gestures, by extra bread. And Myra wrote it all down, because some things should not be forgotten. That right there is the whole story. If this hit different for you, smash that like button right now. It takes 2 seconds, and it means the world to this channel. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story from HFYSCIFI. We drop new stories every week, and some of them will genuinely blow your mind. Watch the next video right here. It is another HFY story that will make you proud to be human. And before you go, drop this in the comments. What would you have done if you were Daniel and learned the truth that day? We read every single one. See you in the next story.